All right. Okay. Thank you, Simon, for your having presentation. I think you explained very well the topics that we talked yesterday, and also you covered many other stuff. Hope everyone get many knowledge on that. So can you hear my voice on also the screen? Can you see the screen? Please type one if you can hear my voice and you can see my screen. Okay, so let's continue with the topic for our day 3 on this Android app development workshop. Today we are going to go over activities and intents. So we just explained these activities and intents before. We just saying like activities is as the screen that you are seeing in your app can be called as an activity, but we will go in deep in today's session. So these are the contents that we plan for today. We will go through how we can define activity in our app, how we can start new activity using intent, and also we will get through how we can pass data between activities with extras, and how we can navigate between activities, sending data with implicit intent and also receiving data. So we'll get through all this, and we will have also practice on it. Okay, activities is it's a component, is one of the application component we use in our app development. It can represent just one window, or it can also be a hierarchy of views. It can typically fix the whole screen. Also, it may be appear as a floating window in your app. So in Java class, typically one activity can be defined in one file. So you can't have more than one activity in your one file. So you only define one activity as in your Java class. So what activity does do in your app? Activity can handle user interactions such as button click and different text entry or different login verification and so on. So this all stuff can be handled by activity inside your activity. So we actually see this in the yesterday's practice part. We did the button handling method inside our activity, right? Also, activity can start another activity or in that activity found in your app. Also, other activity from another app that found in your device. So you can define an app that can start other app that found in your device. So activity can do also this one. Activities do have many life cycle like created, started, run, pause, resume, stopped, and destroyed. I think we will not going through this activity life cycle, but we will just work on the created part. So this let's create our project, and we will see this definition in practice in our Android Studio. Okay, let's create our today's project, and we'll get through some examples of this activity life cycle. Can you see this Android Studio screen? Can you see this Android Studio screen? Please type one if you can see. Okay. So here, this one is the yesterday's project we created. So we can now create new project by going to File and new project. Let's select the MPT one by default and let's name. Okay, we are now day 3, right? Day 3 app. And we'll continue with the default project location, and we select the Java and minimum SDK as default and finish. Okay, let's close this one. We have now this. Let's wait until the Gradle building process will finish. Okay, now done. So here, this is the first method where called when we click on the launcher icon of our app. So this is the first, and at the very beginning, method were called when we click on the launcher icon of our app. So we define everything on this method, or we initialize many tasks so that our application can get through when our app was started. So by default, here we use at override annotation. It means, I think you will get this point in the very beginning of our workshop. Paul explained about inheritance, right? So we are now inheriting everything that found in our parent class, which is we extended on here app compat activity. So we are now overriding the method which found in this class, and we are calling everything that found. We are using everything that found in that class, and also on that we are now adding our own customized layout here. So this is the method we're called when we click on the launcher icon of our app. So everything we will going to initialize inside this concrete method. Okay, so this is there are also a bunch of other life cycles that we may use in our app development. You can go through all other these life cycle methods, like when our activity will paused, resumed, and stopped, and destroyed. So you will use these all life cycle methods in our app. We are not going to use in our app, in our workshop now. These are some examples of activities. So everything you can see in your screen can become with the activity. So they are like user interface, but those user interface cannot be active without activity. So what the relationship between app and activity? So activities are many activities can tie together to make an app. So we can have multiple activities. So those activities were tied together to make an app. So by default, app is a combination of activity. So first activity is the activity that user called main activity, right? So we may have many activities. So but our first activity, you can call it main activity. And activities that can be organized in a parent-child relationship, right? So that you define this parent-child relationship in your Android manifest file so that you can aid the navigation. So we may have multiple activities in your app, and you are now maybe we have 3 activities, right? So our first activity started the second activity, and the second activity started the third activity. So from your third activity, you may click the back button of your Android app, then to which activity you have to go. So you have to define such kind of parent-child relationship in your Android manifest. You may want you may want to go from your third activity to first. So when user click on the back button, you may want to go back to the first activity. So you have to define that one in your manifest file. And let's see the layout and activities relationship. So activity by default come up with the layout, right? So when we create our main activity, it come up with the activity main layout. So because activity by default can't give a meaningful screen for us without user interaction layout. So we define a layout so that it can interact with our activity. So once we create the layout, we can just inflate that layout with our activity, which is inside our concrete method. So that's what we did in our here. So we just inflate our activity with this activity. So we have created this activity main, and we attached that activity inside this layout inside this activity. So that's the way how we can attach the layout with our activity. Let's see the implementation of activities. So far, we just use the default one, the default activity at the very first when we create our project, come up with the main activity, right? So we didn't create our own activity. So if you want to have more than one activity, you have to create another activity, right? So to do so, there are some steps. The first one is you have to create a layout, right? So without a layout, your activity will be meaningless. So first you have to create a layout, and then you define your Java activity by creating a Java class, and you extend app compat activity on it. Because what this means is actually, here we did right. This one, you create, here we just right click and you can create, let's say, create Java class here. Also, you don't need to create Java class. You can just select in here, and you can come to activity, and you can select, let's say, we have many activities, right? So here we have, by default, the template, it come up with many options. So you can select one of these activity. If you want to develop something that have a navigation and different thing, you can select from here. But we will go with the empty activity here. So you can select empty activity, and you can name it whatever you want. Let's say second activity. So you can create an activity for here, and you can, the layout name will be the default name. You can check this checkbox so that it will generate a layout file for your activity. So if you don't check this one, it will not create a layout. So you have to go again through to create a layout. So by default, you can check this one, and it will create a layout for this activity by naming the reverse of this order. So it will create activity second. So you can also say that if you want this activity to be a launcher, whenever you click your app, it will, if you want this activity as a launcher, so you can check this, also check this box, and it will be set as a launcher activity in your manifest. So we don't want this activity to be launcher, so we will not check this checkbox. We just continue with this one. Okay, now we are done. So here, our second activity by default, it come up also with the same activity name we named, and it use the extend keyword by access to extend the app compatibility, app compat activity. This activity we use because you can also use just activity here, but I also talked about this in our very first presentation of this Android workshop. What the difference here, app compat activity and activity is. Activity can be work just for the new version of our Android OS. So you may have new features like material design and other stuff. So to include those stuff in our app, when we run this our app in our Android version like 4 or 4.4, so it may not include those new features. So to include those new features in our old version of app, we have to use the app compat activity. So that's why we use this one. Don't forget to extend this app compat activity when you are creating your activity. So once we create our activity and use the extend app compat activity, now we use we're going to connect the layout with our activity. So to do that, we just here use this set content view method, and we specify the activity what we have. Now here we just connect our activity called activity second, which found in this array. Which found this resource in the layout folder. So we are attaching this activity with our this layout with our this second activity. That's the way how we create our activity and how we can attach that layout to our activity in our onCreate method. So we do this in our onCreate method. So once we are done with this, don't forget to declare this activity in our Android manifest. So by just creating an activity and attaching that activity with our layouts doesn't give it doesn't pop up in our Android screen. So we have to declare that activity in our Android manifest. So by default also it may did that one. Let's check in our manifest and in our Android manifest here. So you can see here Android, if by default, when you create the activity, it will register, it will declare that activity in our Android manifest. So that this is the file, this is the configuration file where will be checked in our Android runtime. So we already defined what mean Android manifest before. So this Android manifest will check over this, how many activities that we have in our app, so that here we now created this second activity in our Android manifest. So we have to declare this one. If it doesn't do by default, we have to do this one by ourselves. For now, it's already set it is already declared here, so we don't need to do that. So okay, once we declare that one, we are done with our creating activity. This is the sample way to go through the coding part to do. You can create a layout by just, we did this one yesterday, right? So use relative layout and you can create inside this layout, you can create any text view or other view, whatever you like to do. And once you are done with the creating layout, you go through the Java, you define an activity of inside Java class, and once you are done with defining the activity, you go attach with the layout with that activity. So once you are done, you declare the activity inside your Android manifest. And if you want that activity to be the launcher activity for your app, you also have to go and name it that activity as a launcher. There is an attribute called action and category. So you go, let's check that one in our Android Studio. So here, for now, our launcher activity is the main activity, right? So this is our main activity. This one, the one we created when we create our project. So this activity were set or registered as a launcher activity here. So the main and the launcher activity is set as this for this main activity. If you want to the second activity to be a launcher activity, you just use this attribute inside this activity tag, so that this second activity will be launcher activity for your app. So once we know the definition of activities and how we can interact with activity with a layout, let's see intent, what it means. So intent is a description of an operation that to be performed. So when, for example, when we click the Android icon, the app icon from our home screen of our device, the Android system will take an intent. So the request that to perform the action for that specific request. So that what that request is that request found in the manifest file. So for now, there is an originator that requesting some action to be performed. So that data will be called as an intent. So that intent will be performed by the Android system. So Android system will do an action for that specific intent, and it will respond back the result. So its intent object is used to request an action so that it will give back the response from another component via using this Android system. So what can intent do? Intent can do many things. For example, intent can start an activity, so that you may want, from your main activity, you may want to start the second activity. So to do that, you use intent. So this is one of the importance of intents we use in our Android app development. So maybe you want a button, so button click started a new activity to maybe for text entry or for other purpose if you want. And also intent can start on service. It means we already know what service means, right? Service used for, like, say, if you want to play music at the background, if you want to download some file at the background. So to do those stuff, you use intent so that our service will be started. And also we can use intent to deliver broadcast. So maybe broadcast means like the notification system, maybe what considered as a broadcast. Also different device related things, like if you are connected to Wi-Fi, if your phone is now charging, if your battery is getting low, or those kind of notification will be used by this intent to deliver such kind of broadcast message. You use also intents. So we'll get practice on this. Actually, there are also two types of intents that we use in our Android development. The first one is explicit intent, and the next one is implicit intent. So what the difference is, explicit intent can start a specific activity, which means the activity that you have in your app. So you may have like two or more than activity in your app, right? So to start one activity which found in your app, you can use explicit intent. So the other thing is implicit intent. This intent used to ask the system in the Android system to find an activity that can handle this specific request. So maybe that request may not be handled by using your app. So you may want another app which found in your device to perform that specific request. Let's say you want to open the album or to open camera or something stuff. So if your app want to open those kind of app, you use implicit intent because those app is not your app, but you want to request them to do some action that you want. Let's say you are passing maybe some URL so that you want some browser app which found in your device. So you pass the data and you want those browser app that found in your device to handle that specific request. So you use implicit intent for such kind of purpose. So we'll get into some example of this. So intent also used for to start activities, right? So if you want to start activities using explicit intent, this is the way you first to start a specific activity. By using explicit intent, you first create an intent. So you create an intent class object here, using by intent class, you create object and you define the for explicit intent, you should now that you know activity and you know the definition, right? Because you are now want to call the activity that found inside your app. Explicit intent is targeting for to starting the intent to start the activity that found inside your activity, inside your app, not outside your app, not from other app. So you know which activity you want to start. So you just name that activity name and by calling that specific class. So that's the way first you create that intent and you use the intent to start by using start activity and by using the object you created using this intent class. So this is the way how you specifically start another activity using intent. If you want to start explicit intent, you don't know which activity you want to start, right? For the implicit intent. Implicit intent just to start activity that found another app. So you don't know which activity you want to start. Just you only have the data, URI data you have, and you task what you want to do. So you pass the action you want, and you pass the data, so that the Android system or will implement that specific request for you. So you just pass the action and URI so that your Android system will get into that and perform that specific request. So this is for example for the implicit intent. So we'll get into all these intent types in our practice part. So this is the implicit intent examples. Let's say we want to show a web page. So to do that, you just pass a URI. If you are using you want to pass an string, better if you use URI and you pass that string. And once you are done with parsing, you just create an intent object and pass the action what you want. So here we want to view. If you are now requesting to view and the data what we want to view, you pass the parsed the parsed string value URI. So once we are done with this, we can start our activity. Also, if you want to dial a phone number, you just pass the string as parsed data, and what the action you want is to dial here action dial, and you pass the URI so that you can start. The Android system will handle this request by searching from the manifest which app can handle this specific request. So we are wanting to a phone call. So which app is available for phone call? So the Android system by default perform the specific request for us. So we don't need to worry about. So we just pass the data and the action only. So let's see how we can send and receive data inside our explicit intent. So we have two types of ways to send data in between different activities. If you want from our main activity, we may want to start the second activity, but we could start the second activity, it's easy, but how we can pass data to second activity. So there are two ways to do that. The first one is they call data, and the other one is extras. So data means you just, if you want the one piece of information to pass throughout, you can represent it in our URI here, as we have seen here. You just, if you have only one data, you can just use URI and parse that data and you can pass. But if you want more than one set of string, you use extras, which is it's like a key value relationship or key value pairs, so that if you put it on the bundle. So bundle is the way that we put our data, like more than one piece of information that we have, we put it on this and key value pair of data, and that will be passed as a bundle so that we can access from another activity using this also bundle class. So to send and retrieve data, you just first need to create an intent object, and you use put data or extras into that intent, and you just start that activity, the activity that you want to call. So to get that data from the second activity, you just need that intent object, and you just the intent object that you created at the starting, and you retrieve that data or extras from that intent object. So we'll get into this in the part. So this is the way to pass the data by using set data, and you parse that string data. And also if you want to pass the file URI, you use set data by using this from file, and you specify the location where that file found. So if you want to pass the file location and with the file name, you can use this method, and you can pass this data so that the second activity will access this data. Okay, if this is the coding part, if you want to see, like, you can use put extra. So for the put extra, this extra were used as a key value pair, right? So you use put extra method and you specify the key. So this is the key where you accessed this specific data 406. So this level, you will access this level keyword in your second activity to access this value. And also you can have multiple data like array. So you use this array, and you can just define a string of an array, and you use put extra, and you define the key for this specific array. Here we use like food, and we pass the food list. Here we defined as a value. And if you want to have multiple also data, like here, we are now specifying one single data, right? So we are now passing the food list here, but the food list defined as a single data. So you are passing that one. If you want a lot of data, if you have a lot of data, you can use put extras. Instead of put extra, we can use put extras, and you pass the bundle so that you pass this created bundle for the next activity. So, okay, so once this is an example, you define the activity message to our second activity. So by using this keyword, so that this is the string value we want to set before, because we are accessing this specific message by using this key in our second activity. So we defining this key, and we are setting this value, so that now we can start our activity, so that we passing this data. So in our second activity, just we implement maybe get data, so that we will get our specific value in our second activity. Okay, so before we're going to see the implicit intent, let's see some practice on this explicit intent. How we can start our second activity using, and also how we can pass data to the second activity. Okay, let's close this one. Now we have, let's say we do have this main activity, and let's switch this one to the code. Maybe let's split it into two. Okay, we by default the Android Studio come up with the constraint layout. So that let's change this one. I don't like constraint layout, so I'll use relative layout. Sorry. So now we are using relative layout so that we can specify our view, one related to the other. So we don't need this one. Okay, let's say this name explicit intent. Just name this one explicit intent, and let's make it center in maybe the out margin from top. Let's say 20 dp, and size, let's give about maybe 30 SCP. So for the size of text, we better to use SCP, okay? Scalable pixel. So once we are done with this, this is just a text view. Now we want to have, let's say, edit text, right? So we want to pass the data that the user input in our text box. So we want that specific data to our second activity when the button may be clicked or something. So let's define edit text. So maybe you can use wrap content, and also for this one wrap content. And don't forget to close the tab. So once we are done with this, our edit text will appear on here, right? So let's say the margin, and maybe we have to set the ID for here. Since we are using relative layouts, so we want to specify different views, one related to the other. So you want this one to be ID, let's say title. Okay, so let's keep an ID for this one too. Let's say edit text, and we want this edit text to be below this our title, right? So we just below and ID and maybe below title. Now our text box will appear on here. Let's give an hint for this text so that the user can identify what kind of input this edit text wants. So let's say enter something maybe text pretend. Okay. So once we are done, our let's say the margin from top so that we can differentiate it from our title. Maybe margin something 25 dp. So we can get our intent, our edit text on here. So I think we are done with this. Now we want when user enters some data in this edit text, and the user will send that the message that found in this text will appear in our second activity. So we want to use intent to pass this data to another activity. So let's create a big button on here, maybe. So the button also maybe wrap content. Once we are done with this, let's close it, and let's say the ID, that ID for BPM, and also the below, right? Below about the edit text. So we are now creating our button below this edit text, so we can say the margin from top, maybe 20 dp. And also we can set the text for this button, right? Let's say transfer, so that when the user enters some data in this text box and it click on this transfer button, it will send the data to our second activity. So we're going to implement that one now. Okay, now I think you can set this button location center horizontal. So our button will appear on here. And also we have to set this one also to center horizontal. Okay, so what's left here? You can set it this one like on the top right corner of this text, right? So instead of making this one at the bottom, better if you set it on the top. Let's say this one. There is an attribute called to right of, maybe, yeah, this one, right of the edit text. Okay, right of edit text, and we have to say the same as left here. This one is, we set it this one below the edit text, right? So instead of making this one below edit text, we just set this one below title. And the margin should be the same, 25 dp here. Let's run this one and see the output. Okay, now we are good to go, right? So we can type some data here. So, and when the user click on this button, it will transfer this text to the second activity. So we will implement that one on this button. But I don't think this one center horizontal. Yeah, we can give some data, and the user click on this transfer button, it will send this data to our second activity. That's the one we want to implement. So now let's go to our Java code and let's declare our edit text here. Okay, edit text, because we are now want to access the data which found this edit text, right? So let's say edit. Once we declare that edit text, and we get this specific edit text by using find U-BYTE, and we want to specify r dot id dot which ID we said before, the edit text, right? So now we can easily access this edit text. So the next thing we want, let's say, on the, instead of using the, we have talked about the how we can easily use the on-click attribute for our button, right? So we can implement that one with the Java. Also, we can set that one in our activity here. Let's say here in our layout, sorry, here on click, and let's say transfer text. So we are now, when the button were clicked, it will call this transfer text method. So we didn't define this method in our activity so far, but we can do it by just alt plus icon on here, and it will pop up the option so that it will create this transfer text method in our main activity. So we just click this create, and now we can implement whatever we want on this transfer text method, so that the operation will be performed here. So what we want inside this method is, now we want to create an intent. So we define an intent, maybe P, and we use new intent. And now we want we are now using the explicit intent, right? So explicit intent, the source and the destination. So the source is this keyword, because this one will have get the application context for this specific activity, and we want to start our destination activity will be what? Let's say second activity. So we have second activity there, and we just specify class. So now we want to, when the button were clicked, we want the second to start our second activity, which found in here. So we are now setting that once we are, before we start this second activity by calling start activity, start activity and T. We can start our activity in this way, but we don't want just to start that activity. Instead, we want to pass. Let's see this one, and we'll modify on it. So now you can just click this button, and it will open up our second activity here. So our second activity the layout is empty here. Let's say the code. So we didn't set anything on here. That's why it's empty. So it is starting our second activity, but the second activity's layout is empty. So there's no user interface in our second activity. But instead of just directly starting our second activity, we want to pass some data. Okay. So the data, what we put it on this. Let's go back. So we want to access this data from our second activity. So to pass the data when we start the second activity, we just use our intent t dot while we talk in the put extra. So we want to pass put extra, and we set the key for here. Since we are using extra, we have to set key and value pair. So let's say text, and what value you want to pass. Let's say we want to pass some hello second activity. Okay. Now we are passing this value, but you are not accessing the value in our second activities. For now, it's also nothing. So just passing the data, nothing will appear in our second activity. So we are now, instead of just passing this written code, this creating string, we just want to get the specific data which found in this edit text. So let's define that one here. What we want to do is, let's say string message is equals to, and we want the edit text dot I think get text. So we will get the text which found that edit text, and we have to parse that into string. Okay. Okay, now we want to pass the string which found the edit text, right? So here we are defining edit text. We are accessing the edit text by using the ID, and we are now getting that specific text message by using get text, and we are passing to a string. So we want, instead of passing this hello activity, hello second activity, we just pass this message. Okay, we just delete this one, and okay, now we are good to go. So now we are ready, and our second activity, now we will going to implement to receive this data in our second activity, because now we are passing data to the second activity, but the second activity is not ready to us. So let's go out to our second activity. Before that, let's define the XML for our second activity here. So we don't have any user interface here. So let's say relatively. Okay, so here let's have a text view. Like this. It's okay. Okay, once we have this, let's give an ID. So this one is our second activity, so that we can say title 2. And we can also say the text for this second activity. Okay, once we are done, and let's give a color, maybe accent. And then what left, the text size, let's say 25 SP, and center horizontal, and margin control. Okay, just to give this a text view in our second activity, just instead of like being empty, we set the title for this activity. Now we want our data to be appear in our text view too. So we just copy this one and paste it over here. Let's say receive. Give an ID of receive, and we don't need to set the text here. So we don't need any text here, just set empty, and we want to be below of the title too. So there is a text view on here, but the text will here is nothing now for now. It will appear the text which sent from this one. We want to set that text inside this text view. That's the thing we want to do on here. We also can set the margin top is already set it. What's left in here? So let's go in our second activity now, because now our first activity is ready to send any data which found in the edit text. Now we implement the code to receive that data inside here. So since we are using put extra in here, we have the data where sent from this activity will be stored inside the bundle, since the data will maybe multiple data. So we just create a class of bundle, object of bundle, let's say B, and let's say get intent, so that we are getting the intent that transferred from our first activity, and we are now get extras. Then, so now our data, the data we transfer from first activity will be stored inside this B object. So from this B object, now we want to get the data that transferred from the first activity. So we define the string. So since we are sending the string of the message to the second activity, let's say data, and is equals to, now we want the data which found in the bundle we created. So B dot, and then get a string, right? Since we are looking for the string data. So get a string, and you pass the key here. So here, let's say, here we are sending the data with the specific key of text, right? So we have to specify that specific key to get, because you can have multiple data here. You can put, again, t dot put extra, and we can have a lot of data we can pass to the second activity. So which data we are now looking for, that one will be identified by using this key. So you have to say this specific key we are looking for in our second activity. So here the key should be the same, so text. So the key we are looking for is found in this text. Okay, now we are ready. So we can easily, this data is the text that transfer from this the first activity or main activity. So we want this text to be appeared inside our this text view. So to do that, we just define the text view here. Receive maybe. Okay. Now we get that specific text view is equals to find view by ID dot which one is, I think receive, right? Yeah. So we are now identifying this specific text view by using the ID. So we want to put this specific text inside our this text view. So what we going to do is just use this receive dot set text, and we pass the text we want to get is data, right? Done. So this all that if you are now transferring a data, whatever the data that the user input inside the edit text, and we are sending that data with the key of text, and our second activity will set that data in our text view. So let's run this and see if it's working well or not. Okay, let's send some data like Android workshop. Now we want to send this, we want to transfer this specific string data to our another activity, which we defined here, second activity. This will happen when we click this transfer button. So let's do that. Now here you can see Android workshop. Oh, the text name is the same here. Let's color, right? If you use this, that's why. Hello, second activity. you can see that the first activity we're sending data to our second activity, and the second activity received that specific data using the key, and it's also saved that data in our second activity's text view. So this is the way how we can send data inside our app. The activity, we may have multiple activities. So if you want to transfer data from one activity to another inside your app, you use implicit intent. What we use here, we just create an intent, and you pass that intent by using put extra, and that data will be accessed from the second activity by using get extra or get that specific data. We may pass an integer value, so you can use here you can use get string instead of get string. You can use get integer. Also, many other data type also can be handled. There are many methods for each data type. So you use such a kind of data type to use your specific data. So this is the way how you can transfer data from one activity to another activity. So what we call explicit intent. So this is the implementation part for this. And I think we will get maybe about 5-minute break, and we'll continue with the implicit intent, so that how we can start another app that found inside your device. So you may want to start another app, not that specific the activity that found inside your app. You want to start another app. So to do that, you'll use implicit intent. So we'll get into that maybe we'll take 5 minutes break, and we'll come back on. If you have practicing with me, you can see I can switch the code part, and you can code through this break time. If you have any questions, also you can ask in the discussion box too. Okay, can we now continue our second part? If you are ready, please type 1. Hello, can you hear my voice and also the screen now? So that we can continue our second part, how we can implement implicit intent, so that we can start another app which found in our device. All right, so let's continue with this part. So how we can now send an implicit intent to start another app, another activity which found in another app. So to do that, the first task we have to do is to create an intent for an action, right? So what action we want to do? So we have to define our action that we want. So when the user click or press that specific button, the Android system will start activity that can make, for here we use the action that is to start the call, right? Call button. So it will appear the call button, which one, if there is an app that can handle this specific request. So if you want to start an activity that can make a call, so you use this kind of action, what you call action call button. So, but here, before we starting the activity for this specific request, you have to use an if clause here. This is to just you may not have a specific app for that specific request, right? So our Android app may not have that may not handle that specific request. We may not have that app, that specific requested app in our device. So to figure out this kind of issue before we starting, we have to implement this one, what you call get package manager. So this one will identify if you can access an app for that specific request, if you have an app for that specific request. So if we don't have any app, so we may not need to start that specific activity or that specific intent, right? So we may not have a phone call app in our device. So we are now asking to open this phone call app. So, but if we don't have that specific app in our device, our app may crash. So to figure out such kind of problem, better to use this get package manager. So if it is not null, we'll continue to start the activity. If it's null, so we don't need to start the activity. So before we just starting the activity, better to use this if clause so that your app will not crash even if there is no specific app in your device to handle that specific request. So this is just to avoid the exception and crashes, so that before just start your implicit activity, use this package manager to check this app. There is a package with this that can handle this specific request. Okay, so if also there are a lot of things that you may pass as a URI for your another app. You may want this one you are already seen. If you want to dial, the action that you pass is this one, the constant action dial, and you pass the data, what the call data, right? The telephone number. So we are now, you created an intent for this specific action, and the data you have to use the set data. We already talked about how you can set the data, and you parse this specific data. So by default, the Android system can identify what kind of data you passed. You may just pass a string value here, and you are requesting to phone call, right? So this one will be identified by Android system by using data scheme, what you call data scheme, which means here you are using tail, right? So this data scheme, the Android system will identify this keyword tail, and which what we call data scheme, and it will now, we are now requesting for the phone call app. So that's how the Android system identify what kind of app we are requesting for. And once we identify, we parse this data, we can start our activity by using this if clause so that we will not get any crash. Okay, so there are also a lot of other data we can pass. Here we are parsing the tail for the telephone number to open the telephone number. Also, we can pass geo here. Geo means if you want to open the map application, so that before you parse the data, the specific data, don't forget to put this specific data scheme so that your Android system will specify which will get which app you are looking for. So here we set the geo, and you can set the longitude or latitude of that specific map, that specific location. If you want to open the browser, you pass the link of the URL of that browser string, and don't forget to put the data scheme here. So this is HTTP is also data scheme, geo is a data scheme here, and tail is the data scheme for phone number. And you can also go through this URI documentation so that you can easily access what kind of data scheme you can easily implement in our app. So here, if you want to start the web page by using the implicit intent, this is because you are now accessing another app, right? So it's not explicit, it's implicit intent. So we are now parsing the URL using the HTTP, and you are what the action we want. So we have to pass that one too, because we are now passing the URL, but that what the action we want to use, we want to perform using this specific URL. So you have to say that one is action view here. Action view means to view that specific web page. So you pass the action and you pass the URL here by using the data to parse it here. Don't forget to parse. If you are using string, you have to parse that string by using this URL class. And once you are done with the parsing, and once you set the action for that specific request, you can just directly start the activity. And for the phone call, you just specify the tail and what action you want for dial, and you pass the URL. You pass it and you can start that. So once you are done with this, also you are multiple ways you can, if you want to pass the data that so search on your web, you can pass also that data, and you can pass the way action web search, and you pass the text that you have for what kind of text you want to search. You set that one and you use this search manager query, which is the key, right? So you the action do you want, and you what the data you have, the query, and you start that activity by using this get package manager, so that it will not happen crash, or it will not happen an extra exception for your request. Because if there is no specific app which found in your device, it will just stop, or it will give you the log message. Okay, so let's before we go into this category stuff, also you can go through before we practice the implicit intent. So category means if you want to pass an additional information about what kind of component you can handle. Maybe the I think it's better if you get switch to this one after we get the practice part for the implicit intent. Okay, now let's try to implement the implicit intent on our activity here. Okay, now we are done with this, right? So let's copy this one. Sorry. Let's say this one to chapter 3, and this one is implicit intent. And we want to, you can say this below, right? Below the button. We want it to be below the button, and you can set the color. And maybe, and also the margin, you can set it about 30 minutes. Okay, now we are ready to implement our implicit intent, how we can open the app which found in our device. So let's create a button for each specific request. Let's say we have, let's create a button here. Let's copy this. Let's create this one is to complete. So we just create our content. And what we want to text for this color is, let's say we want to open the web. So we pass the website address, and we want to open that specific URL by using the browser what you have in your application. So let's say open web. Okay, and then let's say ID. Let's give an ID. Web, and let's give the below, since we are using the relative layout. Let's say below the button, right? The why we have title 3. Oh, this one is title 1, so that's 3. Yes. Yeah. Okay, once we are done, let's say center horizontal. Now let's say margin from the bottom, margin from the top, about maybe 20 dp. Okay, now we are ready with our first button. Let's create about the same kind of button, maybe 2 or 3. Okay, so here, this one we want to maybe call, and let's set it on call, and let's keep this one below the margin of web, and this one to map maybe, and let's give this the text for this one open map, and let's keep the below the margin of code, right? Now our 3 buttons are ready here. So now we can implement for these 3 buttons so that when we click on open web, it will open the default web browser which found in our app. Also, if you have multiple app, it will ask the request as which app you want to pop up for this specific request. So if you are only one app, it will directly open with that app. So now we are ready. I think now we can implement the code for this specific request in our Java, in our main activity here. So for this, we didn't say the on clicks for these all 3, right? So let's create the on click event for each of these. So why with the method we want is to, let's say, implicit intent call. So let's copy this one for all. Now we are getting an error message here because we didn't implement this implicit intent call for our inside our main activity. So we just click Alt plus Enter so that we can create it will create this implicit intent for us. Okay, now we will not get any error here. So we are okay now. Now the thing we have implemented inside this one. So while the data what we have to set the data what we want to open with that specific request, and once we create the action and the request, you can start our intent. So the first thing is I think you guys are familiar with the switch case loop, right? That is switch case. So I think it's better if you instead of like implementing many methods for these 3 buttons, I just use the same method, right? For each, if one of these button were clicked, it will just go to this one method. So I didn't create a different method for these different buttons. I just used one method so that I have to specify which button were clicked. So because it will basically get conflicted because we have the same method here we are using for each button. So we have to identify which ID were clicked. So to do that, we use switch case here. I better prefer that one instead of creating many methods for each specific button for each specific handler. Okay, so I think it's more switch. So we now switching. We're using a switch case statement here. So to do that, we have to specify what kind of request, which button we clicked by using the ID. So to do that, to get that specific ID, we use view dot get ID. So once we are getting that specific ID, now we will case, you'll specify those 3 cases. So which button were clicked from these 3 buttons. So let's say case, and for the first, if it's the first button were clicked, id dot I think web, right? If it's web, so we will implement on this, and we can just do something on inside this. Let's create an intent, and intent, let's say T1, and intent for our web, what we have to pass here is let's say new intent. Don't forget to, we have to pass the action what we want, right? So instead of just impt intent, we just what the action we want. We want to pass, here we have multiple options. So we want to pass what? Since it's web, we want to view, right? So we just click by the default suggestion of view. So now we are passing the intent that we want to, the action we want to do with this specific button. Once we specify the action, we can say the data for this one. We can what URL we want to pass. So we say data, and we pass URI, because you use URI to parse string data. So parse, and we pass the URL. So let's say HTTP, and let's say www.hypergraphic.com. Okay. So now we are parsed the data, and we want to pass this specific data to view with the browser, with the browser app which we have found in our app. So once we set this specific data, now we can start the activity by using the one. Now now we are done with this specific ID for the first button. So if the button were clicked is the web button to open the web, we create an intent of to view that specific action, that specific URL. We set that specific data. Don't forget the data scheme, since it will found the app browser app by using this HTTP. If it's not HTTP, it's not definitely find the browser app from our device. Okay, now once we don't forget to use the break statement here. So once we are done, just copy paste this one for all. We are now here to to all, right? And this one to map, and don't forget change this to the intent type to this one to 2, this one to 3, 3. Okay, what's left? Here the action is different for every for this all, right? So here we don't want to, instead of passing the view for the phone call, also we can dial, right? I think we can pass dial. So we will pass the phone number instead of this string. So you tail small, and we can pass the phone number. Let's say pass my phone number. So once we are done, it will open the phone call app from our device, and it will use this specific, by using this specific tail data scheme. So for this one, what we want to, the same, right? We want to view, so that the data is not the browser data or the URL. Instead, we pass the location. So here we have to pass the longitude and latitude value for a specific location. So I don't know, that just let's take some example, like maybe 20 points, maybe something. See the longitude and latitude value, like maybe 77 point something. So it will open this specific location where it found. Here we don't forget to use the data scheme here. So we have to use geo, since it's we are targeting for the map, for the specific location for this longitude and latitude value. So now we are done. Let's try run our code and see the output. Okay, now we are done with this explicit intent. To see the implicit intent, let's try to click on this open web. So here by default, we only have a Chrome browser in our device, in our emulator. So it will open up the Chrome browser, and I didn't say to configure this browser before, so it will accept some stuff to sign in or something there. So you can see here, it will opening up the URL that I passed. So hypergraphic.com, where he opening this URL. So this is the way to implement for the web. So also you can click back, and you can use phone call. So when I click on phone call, you can see it get the data that I passed here. So by default, it will access the phone call app, and it's appearing my number that I passed. So I can now call or do something stuff. If I do have many phone call app in my device, so it will allow me to choose which app I want to pop up with this specific request. So for now, we only have one phone app, so it will just pop up with this specific app. So now we can call or do something else. And we can go back, and we can check the open map. I think this one, you know what, because you don't have, I don't think you have the map app. Oh, I think you have skipped. And you can see now it is opening the Google map so that it can targeting for that specific. I just specified this one long didn't like it. I don't know where that location will be. So it will open up this specific map and it will go to that specified location. Okay, I think it's enough for today in this implicit intent. So this is the way how you can implement implicit intent so that the app can start. This app is not our app. This phone call app, this web browser app is not our app. So, but we can start them by using implicit intent, by using the specific the target action and URL. Okay, so this is for the implicit part, implicit intent part. Let's see the category or something start. So if you want your app to be to respond for someone's intent, like here we are now accessing the Chrome browser or the map app or the phone call app, right? So if also you want your app to be accessed by another app, like you may be developing a music player app, right? If you are developing music player app, your app should be accessed from another app, right? Because there may be other app, the music may be opened by using your app. So you have to define your activity if you want to handle another person's request. So to do that, you have to specify the category and action part in your manifest file. So you may want your app to be access something openable thing. Let's say if you are developing a reader app for like Foxit Reader or any other reader. So if you want to access someone's request which is openable, so you can specify that category in your Android manifest. So if you open some file, so your app will be getting pop-up like open with option. Your app will be appearing that open with option so that the user can select your app to open that specific PDF or something. Also, if you want to develop a browser app, don't forget to put your category in your manifest saying category of browsable so that the user may click on some link and your app will be popping up to select for that specific request. So your the user will select your app and your app will go to that specific web page. So this stuff you will specify if you are using to read some document, you will use this one, the same one. So don't forget this kind of category in your data, in your manifest. So the way to set that kind of category in your manifest is you just declare intent filters. So you define an intent filter in your activity of intent filter for that specific activity in your Android manifest, and your filter will announce the ability of your activity that you can accept an implicit intent from another activity. So you will put those categories inside your activity. Here you can see, let's go to manifest. So for now, this is for our main activity, we do have intent filter here, right? So this intent filter, we didn't set anything here for now. So our activity, our app, if you are launching this app in our, maybe in our internet or in our Google Store or Play Store, so our app will not be open for some others request because we didn't set any intent filter inside this manifest file. So if you are app, you want to be like to open some browser related thing, to open some document related thing, you have to specify this inside this intent filter. You need to define something category, and inside your category, you just name whatever you want, the category you want. So there is, for this specific activity, we just want to set it as a launcher for our app. So we didn't set anything here for now. So if you want to accept some implicit intent from another app, you have to set it inside this manifest file. So this is if you want to send some message, if you are using some text message app, you can just go to your manifest and you just use an action and you specify the action what you want to send, right? If someone user related to sending some data, your app will be pop up for that specific user because you specified the action for this for this activity, which is a share activity, and inside your share activity, specified your action inside the intent filter tag. So this is the way. So action, it can be one or multiple. So action for view, if you are for developing an app for reader, so you can specify by saying view. If you want to send some data, you can specify by send. So anything that matches for this specific request will be, your app will be popped up. So if some intent will be asked by Android system, then your app will be one of the option, come with one of the option list in your app category. So this is the way. Also, you can specify the category here. So this one is the specific action you want, and this is the specific category. What kind of category specifically you want? So someone maybe send some data like matrix data, which is maybe they use some data like to hack your device or to hack your Android app, to hack your specific app. So you have to define that what kind of data that one should be. It should be something browsable, it should be something openable. So they may send some data that you can't open or something. So you can specify additional information by using this category. So your data maybe by just using some data, it's not a good way or good practice to just accept someone's intent by just using the action. So you have to specify if that data is specifically browsable, if that data is specifically openable. So those all stuff will be used inside the category tag. So also you can specify that one inside this intent filter. So this is the way how you implement if you want to receive an intent from another app. For now, just we have seen how you can call another app by using implicit intent. If you want your app to receive an implicit intent, you can do with this the same way, the similar way. You can also go through the URL that's specified in the PPT from the Android documentation. You can read over there. I think it's enough if you stop down here. Also, we have finished the topics that we planned for today. If you guys have any question, you can ask in the discussion box. Also, if you don't have any question, you can also maybe type 1 in the discussion box if you don't have any question. I think also we have one notice for tomorrow. Maybe tomorrow, many of guys have maybe workshop program on the morning, so that it's not possible to make this workshop on tomorrow morning. So instead, we may shift it to afternoon if you guys are available. So we'll update that information on the group maybe later. So maybe I don't think we will have a workshop session tomorrow morning at the same time. We'll shift it to afternoon, or we will just discuss that one in the group later. If you have any question, you can ask. If you don't, please type 1 in the group discussion box, in the discussion page here.